My husband never saw me. Not really. I'm standing at the kitchen counter on a Tuesday night, holding a knife I'd been using to cut vegetables, when he slams the front door hard enough to rattle the frames. Bills scatter off the counter. His voice follows. You never think about anyone but yourself. I set the knife down. My hands are steadier than my chest, which feels like something pulling tight inside it, wire by wire. My name is Clara Whitman. I am 34 years old, married to Owen for 7 years. In those 7 years, I have worked 2 jobs, built a career in graphic design from scratch, and learned to make myself smaller every time his voice got louder. Tonight is different. Not because I yell back. I don't. I stand at the counter and let him finish. He goes upstairs. The door closes. But something has shifted in me, quietly, permanently. I look at the scattered bills. I look at the kitchen I have cleaned every day for 7 years. I think, he has no idea. For the first time, that thought feels less like grief and more like power. I do not know yet what I'm going to do with it. But I know I am going to do something. He was asleep by 10. I stayed downstairs. I made coffee and sat on the couch, letting my mind go back over the years the way you pick at something healing wrong. 7 years of small moments. The laugh when I mentioned applying for a senior design role, not a no, just a laugh, like the idea was funny. The shrug when I came home excited about a potential contract. Sounds risky, he said, already looking at his phone. The time I presented at a neighborhood meeting and he talked over my last sentence to make a joke. None of it was dramatic. Just the steady daily accumulation of being treated as someone whose thoughts were interesting at best and irrelevant at worst. I had convinced myself this was how marriages worked. That I was being sensitive. Sitting on the couch at 10:30, I stopped convincing myself. I was not sensitive. I was invisible. And somewhere in the last 7 years, I had started to believe I deserved to be. The coffee went cold. Outside, it started to rain. I sat in the quiet of a house I kept and a life I had managed alone, and I decided that invisible was not the end of the story. It was just where the story turned. I didn't always believe that. When Owen and I first moved in together, I was 26, working at a small agency by day and building my freelance portfolio at night. I remember the exhaustion of those years, not despair but ambition running faster than your body can keep up. Owen seemed steady then, or I saw him that way. He was confident and laughed at my jokes, and I mistook his certainty for security. I worked at the kitchen table after dinner while he watched television. He said once, not unkindly, "You put so much time into that. Is it actually going anywhere?" I said yes. He nodded the way people nod when they have already decided the answer is no. That was the first time. I registered it, filed it away, and kept working. Over the years those moments accumulated. Each one small. Together they were a wall, built so gradually I didn't notice I was standing behind it until I was deep enough that the light looked far away. I thought about that sitting on the couch that Tuesday night. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the numbers I had been building quietly for 2 years. They were good. Better than good. And Owen had absolutely no idea they existed. 18 months earlier, I had started taking projects under C. Whitman Design. My real name, but separate enough from our shared life that I could build it without it becoming a conversation I wasn't ready to have. Clients found me through referrals. Then through a design directory. Then through an industry newsletter I had not mentioned to Owen because I knew his response, that half-smile managing to be both dismissive and possessive at once. 3 ongoing contracts. A 4th in negotiation. Revenue exceeding what I earned at the agency where I had worked for 4 years. I had not been hiding this out of spite. I had been building it carefully, the way you build anything that matters, quietly, without asking for permission you know won't be given. Owen assumed I spent evenings on what he called hobby work. I let him assume that. The assumption was protection, for the work, for me, for the version of myself I was slowly constructing while he watched television. I closed the laptop. For the first time in a long time, I slept easily. Because I finally understood the difference between being invisible to someone else and being invisible to yourself. I had never been invisible to myself. I had simply been acting like it. The first real test of the shift came 2 months before that Tuesday night. A professional development seminar, 2 days in the city, design leadership and client acquisition. I registered without telling Owen, paid from my own account, arranged coverage. When I told him, he was in a good mood, which made it harder. "Cancel it," he said, still cheerful. "My firm's client dinner is that Friday. I need you there." 7 years ago I would have cancelled. 5 years ago, apologized. 3 years ago, negotiated. Instead I said, quietly, "I've already committed. It matters to me. I'll be at the next dinner." He stared at me. Not with anger. With the look of someone who has reached for something always kept in a certain place and found it gone. "Since when?" he said. "Since now," I said, and went to make dinner. He didn't push it. He didn't apologize either. But he watched me differently that evening, with new attention, uncertain and slightly wary. I noticed. I filed it away. I went to the seminar. And what happened there changed the direction of everything that followed. The shift I had felt in my chest was no longer just a feeling. It was becoming a fact. At the seminar, I met Petra, who ran a mid-size branding firm and needed a senior contract designer. We talked for 4 hours across 2 evenings. By the end of the second day, she offered me a contract that would have changed my financial picture even if I accepted nothing else. I accepted it on the train home. I sat by the window watching suburbs slide past, holding my phone with the signed agreement in my email, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement exactly. Solidity. The feeling of standing on ground that was genuinely mine. I did not tell Owen that night. I ordered dinner, ate at the kitchen table while he talked about his firm, and listened the way I had learned, present enough to respond, private enough to keep what mattered safe. It wasn't dishonesty. It was timing. I had learned the difference from watching how he managed information, sharing what benefited him, withholding what didn't. I was applying a lesson he had been teaching me for years. By the end of that month, Petra's contract was my largest active account. Owen still thought I was doing hobby work in the evenings. He was not wrong that I was building something. He was simply wrong about what it was worth. I want to be honest about those years. There is a version of this story where I was a quiet hero, building serenely while unfairness rained down. That is not accurate. The accurate version is that there were nights in the home office, a room Owen once suggested I didn't need because how much space does a hobby take? When I felt the full weight of being unseen by the person supposed to know me best. I felt it physically. A tightness in the chest. A persistent grief. I thought about leaving. More than once. I stayed partly because I believed something could shift, and partly because I wasn't yet secure enough to leave with the confidence I needed. The practical reality of leaving is not straightforward, and I was not going to walk out until I was moving toward something rather than simply away. So I stayed. I worked. I built. On the nights when the grief was loudest, I opened my portfolio and looked at what I had made, real work, real clients, real income, and reminded myself that what I was building was not just a career. It was proof. Proof that I had always been exactly who I thought I was. The question was whether anyone else would ever see it. By early spring, I had a clear strategy. Not a revenge plan. Revenge suggests something impulsive, and what I was doing was neither. It was a plan for my own life, built with intention, that happened to make visible something Owen had been choosing not to see. The elements were simple. Financial independence fully established before any conversations. Professional reputation confirmed publicly. Personal clarity about what I needed from this marriage. I had been seeing a therapist named Dr. Osei for 8 months. I talked to my closest friend Nadia, who had watched the marriage from the outside and said, carefully, more than once, "You know you're allowed to take up space, right?" I talked to no one else. Owen gathered information the way some people collect objects, without apparent purpose until the moment it was useful. I had learned to be thoughtful about what I shared. I kept my own counsel. I kept my own accounts. Every evening I went to the home office and worked on projects that were mine, building a foundation belonging entirely to me. The strategy had one central principle. I would not ask to be seen. I would simply become visible, clearly and undeniably, and let the reality speak. That was the whole plan. April brought a turning point I hadn't anticipated. Petra asked me to lead a presentation for a new client, a retail brand refreshing their visual identity. A full-room presentation, my name on the materials, my work at the center. I said yes without hesitation. Owen knew nothing about it. I described it to him as a workshop. I had stopped explaining my professional schedule in detail because his questions, when they came, were designed to diminish rather than understand. The presentation went well. Better than well. The client asked 3 genuine follow-up questions, which is the real measure of whether you've been heard. Petra texted afterward, "That's exactly what we needed. The room loved you." I drove home in the early evening with the windows down, playing a song I'd loved in my 20s that I had somehow stopped listening to. I felt entirely like myself. Not a performance of myself, not a careful edited version. Just Clara Whitman, doing work she was good at, in a room full of people glad she was there. Owen was home when I arrived. He asked how the workshop was. "Productive," I said. He went back to his laptop. I went to the home office. I had more work to do. The newsletter feature ran on a Thursday morning in late April. A design publication I had read for years ran a quarterly feature on independent designers doing notable work. 3 months earlier I had been approached for an interview. I gave it carefully and did not mention it to Owen. The feature ran under my full name, Clara Whitman. It included a photograph, a description of C. Whitman design, and quotes from 2 clients including Petra. I knew the publication date. I checked the newsletter before Owen woke, read the piece twice, then made breakfast as usual. He came downstairs at 7:30, made coffee, opened his laptop at the kitchen table. I watched his expression shift. A slight frown of recognition. A pause. A second read. He looked up. "Clara Whitman Design," he said slowly. "This is your work." "Yes," I said. "This says you have 12 active clients." 13 now. Petra's referral came through yesterday. He set the laptop down. I sipped my coffee. I had been waiting for this moment for 2 years. I had imagined it as dramatic. It was quieter. Just 2 people in a kitchen, one finally visible, the other realizing he had been looking the wrong way for a very long time. No triumph. No cruelty. Just the truth. Finally in the room. He didn't say much that morning. He went to work. I went to mine. But something had changed, a shift in pressure you feel before you can describe it. He came home that evening with the manner of someone trying to appear normal when uncertain what normal is. He asked about my day. He listened differently, watching my face the way someone watches a road they have been driving carelessly, suddenly revealed as requiring real attention. I answered simply. I didn't perform warmth or coldness. I was just myself, which was the most unfamiliar thing I could have offered. We ate dinner without his usual commentary on whoever had irritated him. I noticed the silence and didn't fill it. Over the next 2 weeks he read more of my work. I knew because he mentioned clients by name, details from the newsletter, things from my website he had clearly reviewed. He was doing what he did when something surprised him. Research. Recalibration. I let him recalibrate. I had waited 7 years. 2 more weeks was nothing. What mattered was not the speed of the change but its nature. He was not performing attention. He was genuinely trying to understand something he had chosen not to see. That was the change worth waiting for. The dinner happened on a Friday evening in May. 2 weeks of holding pattern, him processing, me working, both of us careful in a way that was different from before. This careful had respect in it. I made a real dinner. Not because I felt I had to, but because I wanted to say what needed to be said in a deliberate setting. He sat across from me. We ate in a quiet that had become more comfortable than combative. Then I said, I want to talk about the last few years. He put his fork down. I didn't accuse. I didn't list grievances. I described what the years had felt like, the dismissals, the condescension, his certainty consistently crowding out mine. I cited specific moments, not to wound him, but because vague feelings can be argued with and specific facts cannot. He was quiet through most of it. When I finished he said, I didn't realize the design work was this serious. I know, I said. That's part of the problem. He nodded slowly. It wasn't a resolution. But it was the first honest conversation we had managed in years, possibly in the entire marriage. There would be more conversations and more work ahead. But this one was enough to start with. I had written a letter in March, not to send yet, but to clarify my thinking. 2 evenings in the Home Office with the door closed. What came out was more precise than expected. I wrote about the first apartment, the 2 jobs, the portfolio evenings he called wasted time. The neighborhood party, the laughter, the careful nods. What it cost to stay invisible while building something real. Not the financial cost but the daily personal cost of performing smallness while privately refusing to accept it. I wrote, I was not becoming someone new. I was becoming visible. Those are not the same thing. After the Friday dinner, I left the letter on the kitchen table. He read it the next morning. I was in the office when I heard the silence of someone reading something they cannot put down. He came to the door. You've been carrying this for a long time, he said. Yes, I said. Why didn't you say anything? I looked at him. When would you have listened? He didn't answer. But having no answer was its own answer. He went back to the kitchen. I went back to my work. The air between us had changed, lighter, or at least more honest. Which, I had learned, amounted to the same thing. May brought a networking event Nadia organized, a quarterly gathering for women in creative industries. I had attended before, always quietly, always in the background the way I had trained myself to occupy rooms that felt public. This time I arrived early and stayed the full evening. 3 people approached me about C. Whitman design before I had touched my first drink. Petra had mentioned my name in her network. By 9 o'clock I had 2 business cards and a follow-up meeting scheduled. Owen had offered to pick me up. I let him, which was a small experiment. He waited in the lobby. When I came out with Nadia, who had been watching me all evening with the satisfaction of a friend whose belief in you has been publicly confirmed, Owen looked at me the way he had since the newsletter. Trying to reconcile 2 versions of the same person. Good evening, he asked. Very, I said. Nadia caught my eye as we walked to the car and said nothing, which was the most eloquent thing she could have done. I had been visible in a room full of peers. I had not needed him to make me so. That was the point of the experiment. The experiment confirmed exactly what I already knew. June brought the contracts I had been negotiating since February. 3 new accounts, all mid-size firms, all requiring work at a level far above where I had started. I had submitted proposals in my own name, negotiated rates, and signed agreements without asking anyone's opinion. The combined value exceeded my annual agency salary. I told Owen over coffee on a Sunday morning. Factually, without defensiveness, without apology. He sat with it. You negotiated all of this yourself, he said. Yes. You didn't tell me you were working on it. I needed to know it was mine before I shared it, I said. He looked at his coffee. I have been very arrogant, he said. Not a speech. Not an explanation with self-justification woven through. 6 words, quietly, which made them the most significant thing he had said to me in years. I nodded. I didn't rush to reassure him. He needed to sit with it, not be rescued from it. We sat in the kitchen with Sunday morning light and 2 cups of coffee growing cold. The silence was different from the one we had been living in. This one had something in it, not comfort exactly, but the particular quality of 2 people finally occupying the same room. That Sunday afternoon I went to the Home Office and looked at what I had built. Not the revenue figures, though those were real. Not the client list, though it was growing. I looked at the actual work, projects on the screen, designs that existed because I had made them. 7 years earlier, Owen had asked if my portfolio was actually going anywhere. It had gone somewhere. Somewhere specific and measurable, built during evenings he thought I was wasting and mornings he assumed held nothing of consequence. I sat for a long time. I thought about the Clara Whitman who had stood at the kitchen counter 2 years earlier, holding a knife, feeling the tight wire feeling in her chest, knowing something had to change. She had not known how to change it yet. She had only known that the invisible version of herself was not the true version, and that the true version deserved to be known. I looked at the screen. The true version had been here the whole time. I hadn't needed Owen to see me in order to exist. I had needed, finally, to stop making myself smaller so he would be comfortable. One is waiting for rescue. The other is building your own door. I had built mine. I had walked through it. By July, the shift was visible to people outside our house. We went to dinner with couples we had known for years, friends from Owen's work. I had always occupied a particular role in those evenings, attentive, supportive, present only in relation to him. Partway through dinner, one of his colleagues named Patrick asked about C. Whitman design. He had seen the newsletter feature and had a contact who might need branding work. The conversation shifted naturally, the way attention follows something genuinely interesting. Owen said nothing to redirect it. He watched me talk about my work, my process, my plans, and he was quiet in the way someone is quiet when hearing something familiar but listening properly for the first time. After dinner, walking to the car, he said, "You're good at that." "At what?" I said. "Talking about your work. Making people want to know more." "I've been practicing," I said. He nodded, and I could see him understanding what that meant. The years of evenings, the careful building, the long preparation for a version of myself he had assumed didn't exist. He looked like a man realizing he had been wrong for a long time. I didn't comment on it. Some realizations are most useful when allowed to arrive quietly. Patrick's referral led to a meeting, which led to a contract that became one of my strongest accounts that year. I mention this not to catalogue victories but because it illustrated something I had been learning, that visibility compounds. One person tells another. One opportunity generates the next. Owen watched this happening. He was intelligent enough to understand the mechanism and honest enough, by then, not to minimize it. He started asking real questions. Not the old ones, is it going anywhere, is it worth the time, but genuine ones. What was the work? Who were the clients? What was I building toward? I answered carefully. Not withholding, but measured. I had spent years developing a habit of privacy, and I was loosening it at the pace that felt right to me. He respected that. Which was, I thought, the most important shift of all. Not that he had begun to see me, though that was real, but that he had begun to understand the shape of what he had missed. The size of it. The years of it. He said once, "I kept assuming I understood what you were doing. I never actually asked." "No," I said. "You didn't." He nodded. No defense. No explanation. Just acknowledgement. Which was more useful than either. There was an evening in August I want to describe. Owen came home from a difficult day. The kind of day he used to process by letting frustration land on whoever was nearest, which had historically been me. He came in quiet. He made a drink. He sat at the kitchen table. I was finishing a proposal in the Home Office. I heard him and waited. He came to the office door. "Rough day," he said. "I'm sorry," I said. Genuinely. The Henderson account fell through. 6 months of work. "That's hard," I said. He stood in the doorway. "You ever have that? Work a long time on something and then lose it?" I thought about 2 years of evening work on projects he hadn't known existed. I thought about 7 years of smaller losses, confidence, visibility, the steady erosion of believing my own opinion mattered. "Yes," I said. "I have." He nodded. He didn't ask for detail. He went back to the kitchen. But he had come to my office door, which he had never done before. He had asked about my experience, which he had also never done. Small things. But large changes are always assembled from small ones. That evening felt like one of those small ones that mattered. In September I left the agency. Not dramatically. It was the logical conclusion of a year in which my independent work had outgrown my salaried position. I gave 4 weeks' notice, finished what I owed, and left on a Friday with the lightness of someone walking off a stage past their cue to exit. I told Owen the night before I gave notice. Not to ask permission. I had learned, finally, that my professional decisions were mine. But because I wanted to include him. Because sharing it felt different from needing his approval, and I was learning to tell those two things apart. He looked at the numbers. Revenue, contracts, projections. You built all of this, he said. I built all of this, I confirmed. A long quiet. Then, I owe you more apologies than I know how to give. You can start with one, I said. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just real. He looked at me. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. You were right here, doing all of this, and I was somewhere else entirely. It wasn't everything. But it was true. And truth, I had learned, was the only foundation worth building on. Everything else had only mattered because it was built on something real. This was real. October. C. Whitman Design had 6 active contracts, a growing pipeline, and a reputation built from consistent good work. I had been meeting monthly with Dr. Osei. We had spent much of the year examining what I needed from the marriage. Not whether to stay or leave, but what I required to stay as myself, without reverting to the invisible patterns of 7 years. I had a list. Not demands. Needs, stated clearly. I shared it with Owen on a Sunday afternoon in the kitchen. He read it. He asked questions about 2 items. He agreed to all of them. I am not saying this as triumphant conclusion. Agreeing and doing are different, and I was not naive about the work remaining. But we had arrived at a place where honest conversation was possible, which was not where we had started. I want this to work, he said. So do I said. But it has to be honest. He nodded. We sat in the October afternoon light, and for the first time in a long time it felt like we were genuinely in the same room. Not performing. Not managing each other. Just 2 people who had made serious mistakes, trying to build something better from what remained. That was enough to continue. Nadia and I had lunch in November. She is the kind of friend who watches from a careful distance, close enough to see clearly, far enough not to interfere until needed. Over lunch she said, "You're different." I know, I said. Not dramatically. Just solid. Like you've stopped waiting for permission. That was the right phrase. I had spent years in a state of low-level waiting. Waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for the dismissals to stop, waiting for Owen to see me so I could feel real. What 2 years of building C. Whitman Design had taught me was that the waiting was the problem. Not the permission. The work had not been waiting for his approval to be real. The clients had not cared whether Owen found my career credible. The contracts had not required his acknowledgement in order to be signed. I had been real the whole time. I had simply been conducting myself as though I needed him to confirm it. That was the habit I had finally broken. Not through confrontation. Not through revenge. Through the slow, steady practice of treating my own voice and my own work as worth taking seriously. Nadia poured more coffee. "You look like yourself," she said. "I am," I said. I meant it completely. December brought a moment I had not planned for. Owen and I went to his firm's holiday party, an event I had attended for 7 years as the supportive spouse whose name people occasionally forgot. 3 people approached me before Owen finished his first drink. A colleague who heard about C. Whitman Design from Patrick. A woman wanting to discuss collaboration. A partner who had seen my work. Owen watched from across the room. I was genuinely engaged in each conversation, not performing for him. But at one point our eyes met, and something passed between us I don't have a precise word for. Not triumph. Not vindication. Recognition. He raised his glass slightly. I smiled and turned back to my conversation. I did not need the moment to be bigger than it was. This was the same party where 7 years earlier he had talked over my sentence to make a joke. Where I had smiled and filed the humiliation away. The room was the same. The people were the same. I was not. And the difference had nothing to do with contracts or newsletters or money. It had to do with knowing my presence did not require his endorsement to be real. January. A new year. I had been thinking about what I wanted to say here, and I kept returning to what it actually felt like to arrive at this place. It did not feel like winning. It felt like becoming. I had not set out to defeat Owen or expose him. I had set out to reclaim something that had eroded. My sense of my work's worth, my belief that my voice was worth raising, my willingness to occupy space in my own life. Owen had changed. Meaningfully, I believed. More careful, more present, more willing to ask real questions. We were not the same couple, but the couple we had been was not worth preserving. We were building something different. Slower. More honest. I did not know if it would be enough. I was still seeing Dr. Osei. Still being careful with my own needs, attentively, without apology, without waiting for permission. But I was in my life fully. That was what I had wanted. That was what I had built, not just the business, the contracts, but the specific hard-won capacity to be present in my own existence without asking permission first. 7 years is a long time to spend invisible. 1 year, it turns out, is enough to find your way back. My husband sees me now. Not because I fought dramatically for it. Not because a single confrontation changed everything. Because one Tuesday night, standing at the kitchen counter with a knife in my hand and bills on the floor and a tight wire feeling in my chest, I decided that invisible was not a life I was willing to keep living. Then I went to the home office, opened my laptop, and kept building. That was the whole story. The rest was just the shape it took. The newsletter, the contracts, the dinner conversations, the letter on the kitchen table, the Sunday mornings with coffee going cold. I am Clara Whitman. I run C. Whitman Design. 12 active clients and growing. I have a home office I no longer justify. Work I no longer protect. A voice I no longer wait to use. My husband watches me with attention that is different. Not the assessing attention of someone who has decided your value, but the genuine attention of a person still learning who you are. It took him 7 years to look properly. It took me 7 years to stop making it easy for him not to. Neither of us is proud of that. But we are both, finally, here. Here was worth every evening of building toward it.